Hi, hello, and welcome back to the Madness and Meaning podcast. I'm just going to come right out and say it that this is looking like it will be the last episode of the Madness and Meaning podcast. After a whole year since you and I started recording these, we didn't release any until January, but I think it's been literally
Yeah.
like exactly a year
Yeah.
since you came to me with this idea for the podcast. And I have some things I want to share about leading up to the end of the podcast that is going to lead me to what we've decided our topic is going to be for this episode. And that is that, well, first of all, you and I have both just kind of felt the energy behind this slowly dwindling over time. And we've acknowledged it over the last few times that we've met. I mean, even last week, Amanda and I met to record a podcast. And after talking for like an hour, we're like, let's just not record today.
Yeah.
The energy was just not there. And I'll share for me personally, I just said this to Amanda a few minutes ago that I feel like I'm in a space right now where I haven't even had a deep thought in I don't know how long, which is really crazy to me because I feel like for the majority of the last several years that I've been on my quote unquote spiritual awakening journey, like everything has felt so deep. And I'm always like thinking so meaningfully and purposefully about everything and analyzing everything. And that just hasn't really been a part of my experience as of recently. And I think on some level, that's freaked me out a little bit because I'm like, oh, am I losing touch with things or what's going on? Am I doing something wrong? Am I not meditating enough? Like, I just start freaking out about like, am I backsliding in some way? But there's a different perspective on that kind of only just came to me a few minutes ago, honestly, Amanda, when you mentioned a potential podcast topic for our last episode, which was reflecting on this last year and what we've learned and what we've grown through over the last year through this podcast and otherwise that you and I have moved through over the last year. And immediately, what felt really relevant to me of what made this year so significant was that I feel like I have really grounded into the human aspect of my spiritual awakening journey and the human experience of that. And I think you and I have referenced before this idea that we both learned through a mentor called waking up, waking down, and waking out. And a lot of, what we think of when we think about spiritual awakening and manifestation and all of the like popular stuff that's out there is really about like waking up, like realizing that there's more to the human experience than what meets our eye, and learning about spirit and learning about the unseen and learning about, all these different things and energy and manifestation and how our thoughts create a reality, blah, 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 blah. And that being so mind-blowing and so like, wow, when you first learn it. And I think you and I have both bonded on this over the last year that we're kind of over that, like, to the point where it's almost kind of annoying to see that kind of content online because there's something about it that doesn't feel like it's representative of the whole truth. And to me, I feel like I've grounded more fully over this last year into what's true for me and in this lifetime and in my awakening and in the integration of spirit and human. And that has looked a lot like being a lot more in my human experience this year. There's been a whole lot of creating friendships and connections with people that aren't based off of like, we're healing and we're growing and we're releasing and we're manifesting, which like love those types of friendships as well. But to have people in my life that's not the primary thing that we bond on, and seeing and feeling and experiencing the value of just human to human connection and being able to connect with people on things that I'm moving through in my life without having the overarching theme of that conversation being, how am I going to grow from this? Or what is this triggering in me, et cetera, et cetera. Which again, I love those types of conversations and I value having those kinds of relationships and people in my life. But it's been really interesting to experience more than that over this last year. And that's also come with spending a lot more of my time and my energy on hobbies and experiences and just doing things that aren't necessarily of the direct purpose of helping myself grow or manifest or reach somewhere different or get higher or heal more, but just genuinely to learn to enjoy and to have fun and to be present and to just follow the excitement of whatever it is in that moment. And so over this last year, it's funny that we've had this very spiritual forward podcast, and you and I wanted to have this platform that we could talk about things in the spiritual community in a deeper way and in our own unique and authentic way than we have ever seen them being talked about before. And we absolutely did that. But I think, and I'm curious if you agree with this, that we started off with like such really deep, heavy topics. And that sort of started to transition over time where those types of topics, that, at least for me, started to not feel all that real or authentic or alive inside of me anymore. And I think I've judged that a lot. Again, trying to like, is there something wrong with me? Am I losing touch with things? Am I not able to see things as deeply or as clearly or as purposefully as I could a year ago? But maybe that's just because part of my journey this year and what I was intending to move through was that integration of the spiritual experience and everything that I've spent the last several years so hyper focused on into more of the human aspect of things.
It's so interesting to hear your perspective of this because, on one level, like I'm there with you. I noticed that the beginning of this podcast was like, let's go as deep as we can and scare
Yeah.
people with
And we
everything
loved
that
it.
we know.
We
And then as
loved
time
it.
goes by, we got a little tired, I feel like,
Mhm.
and we just wanted to keep it light. And I
Yeah.
noticed that too. And I didn't see it as a problem at the time. And I think where I'm going with this, where my experience over the last year has been a little bit different from yours, is that I came into this podcast feeling like I had something to prove, and I was using it to do that. I I was feeling so unseen inside of other conversations with other people, and I wanted somebody that I knew could meet me and challenge
Yeah.
me, and where I could just feel like I could express everything that I had been bottled up and get it out and show both people as well as myself how much I actually know. And I took this podcast very seriously because that's typically my go-to is I create
Uh-huh.
big stakes for myself inside of things. And it's all in my head. There's no stakes to this podcast. But for me, it was like a big deal that it go well for me. Um, you know, to avoid whatever shame would be, evoked if it didn't. And over the course of the last year, I came into this podcast like prepping quite heavily for these episodes and wanting to challenge myself to go as deep as possible into these conversations to prove that I knew what I was talking about and that I and to also meet you because you are so intelligent and I wanted to be able to rise to meet you where you were at on energetically. And over the
Oh,
course of the last year, I started to recognize that so much of that was no longer needed for me. I didn't need to prove anything anymore because I felt like I already had. And then I didn't feel
yeah.
like I needed to prep for these podcasts because I could trust what was trying to come through me in the moment, trust my own wisdom that had already been accumulated, that I didn't need to accumulate any more of. It's there. It's okay. You can fall back on it and also be open to more that wants to come through you in the moment that can't if you're constantly looking at notes. And I also started to trust in our own energy. Like if we would show up with an idea for an episode that just didn't feel alive, that's okay too. Like if we want to
Yeah.
talk about something light, then let's trust the energy that's present. And then on top of that, you were saying that over this last year, you became more interested in your human experience than your quote unquote spiritual or soul experience. And for me, I feel like it's been a little bit different, where this podcast had a spiritual kind of lens, but we were talking about it from a very human perspective. And I'm at this place right now where I'm trying to, or maybe not trying to, but I'm noticing that I am reaching a little bit higher towards ideas that are more intangible and
Yeah.
less about the human experience and more about the soul's experience as a human, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And there,
Yeah.
I don't really know how to articulate it in a more specific way than that, but it just feels a little bit different, but right for where I'm at. And then personally grounding into my human experience in terms of trust and safety rather than needing to prove it through what I'm doing, but just feeling it innately. And
Mhm.
that it has been my kind of journey over the course of this last year. And this podcast has given me so much more than I ever thought it would in being able to do that.
Aw.
I came into
Yeah.
this wanting it to give me, you could probably guess, clients and money and certainty and
Uh-huh.
significance and validation.
Validation.
And you know what? I got most of those things,
Yeah,
but in a completely different way than I anticipated, and in
totally.
a way that I never could have dreamed up because it's so much better than what I could have dreamed up.
Isn't that usually how it goes too?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, especially for you and I, like I feel like we have this shared experience of like manifestation never working the way that we were taught it's supposed to work for us.
I just had this conversation with someone and I was talking about, I was expressing my pain point, which is that I'm always unseen, no one recognizes me, blah, blah, blah. And we were talking about how, there's this egoic lens through which the spiritual community kind of speaks, which is manifestation for the sake of your egoic part, which is not a bad thing. It's just a
Yeah.
representation of that consciousness. And I was there for a long time. I used marketing fear tactics and I tried to appeal to people's doubt and deepest desires. And, I was only doing it because I was told that that was how you had to do it and because that's all I knew and because that's where I was at. And it never worked. Even
Yeah.
though every marketing and salesperson and business person said this is how you do it, it didn't work. And it was never
Yeah.
supposed to work for me because I was supposed to explore something different. And I feel like it's the same for you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I also am uh, I find it interesting to point out like the difference in where you and I are currently at and how we're approaching our businesses as well. Because you have currently been in a space of like carving a path for yourself, creating something so unique to you and expression of you, and working really hard on creating this thing and putting it out there and working through all the kinks of that
Yeah.
and what that's bringing up for you. And I've been on a journey of just stepping completely the fuck away from everything related to my business. And I mean, people that have been following our podcast have seen us go through that journey because we've talked about it
Yeah.
in different episodes. I remember having a podcast episode with you right after I had this realization that I was just going to stop posting on social media because I was burnt out and didn't want to do it anymore. And that must have been at least like 6 months ago, maybe at this point. I don't even know. We started this podcast and I realized I was going to go back to university or that I wanted to go back to university and take a completely different path than the entrepreneurial path I had been on for so long. And it's I don't really know what my point here to all of this is, but I'm curious like what about our experiences are obviously different from that, but also like where do the similarities lie in how
Yeah.
we are being inside of our expressions of that differently.
Well, I think what I'm hearing you say is that you started this podcast at the end of 2023
Yeah.
with a very specific intention for this year. And that
Yeah.
changed drastically over the
So
course of the year.
drastically.
And the same thing happened to me because at the
True.
beginning of this podcast at the end of last year, I was still in coach mode because I didn't really know where else to be. I was still doing
Yeah.
a lot of channeling and I was trying to figure out how to make that work, even though it didn't feel right.
Hmm.
And then over the course of this year, my path changed completely. I stopped channeling. I stopped coaching, kind of. I went
Yeah.
from one-on-ones to creating this group thing, and it's the most fulfilled that I've ever been inside of my life, let alone
Yes.
work. And it's nothing that I anticipated. And it
Yeah.
just kind of came in a moment where I was open to receiving it. And so we started this year with a specific intention and a specific purpose and path that got completely derailed. And I mean, you can speak to how that has felt for you as it was happening and
Oh.
now,
Oh.
right?
Yeah. I mean, there were definitely moments throughout the last year where it felt like an extremely painful death.
Yes.
Very, very, very painful. Like but what I will say about those is that those aren't new to me. Like that's obviously going to be a part of this journey. We're always going through these different ego deaths and everything. But what was different about this year compared to previous years is that they tended to go by a lot quicker. And that
Interesting.
was very notable to me. Like whenever something would come up that would threaten the certainty that I thought that I had about my future, or change my plans, or make me realize something, or would make me feel defeated because something I was working on wasn't working, et cetera, et cetera. It would bring up these really, really intense feelings for me. And I think what I'm assuming my contribution to this being different was is that I think I was more capable of just sitting in the fire and feeling it. I don't think there was as much of me trying to figure it out and understand why is this happening as much as before. Maybe because I was just kind of burned out of like trying to understand and like pick apart everything and what the purpose behind it is, like really being inside of that spiritual experience. This year being more kind of just like living my human life. Like I was working a second job for the first time ever and having friends that weren't really in this world. So I think that being in that kind of environment weirdly put me in a position where when these triggering things would happen or these ego deaths would happen, I was just too tired to overthink them, that I was just purely feeling them. And because I was just letting myself feel, and of course, using certain tools and things that I've learned in the last few years of my spiritual awakening to help myself process through those things, but in a much less um, motivated way, where I'm trying to use these tools to get somewhere, but more so just like letting these things be a part of how I'm caring for myself through these difficult experiences. And as a result of me just being in a space where I could just be present and feel what was really difficult for me in the moment, every single time that I remember going through something difficult, it was like a 24-hour turnaround from like absolute chaos, I feel like I'm dying, to, oh, I understand. Or, oh, I see what's going on
You,
here.
I hope you don't mind me saying this, but like I have I have been like we've met every ba almost every single week
Yeah.
for the last year, and I
Mm.
have watched you go through these highs and these massive lows where I've been like, I don't know how she's up for recording today. Like, and
Oh,
I don't like you must remember being like me being like, are you
you did ask me that a
sure?
lot.
Like, are you sure you want to record today? You just survived
Oh,
like a flood and a famine and a fire and like, like getting stranded in another country without your passport, like all alone. Like, how are you
yeah.
sure you want to record today? And like seeing you like from someone watching you, I felt like I was watching like this little girl. Like it was a very like
Oh,
vulnerable person in front of me. And then I watch you just like pop up into this like elevated, high vibrational, like alive
oh.
version of you. And for those of you listening, like you, Kelly hides this very well. So she shows up for these podcasts and like you'd never know. But like that was crazy to witness you moving through that. And you do kind of experience things in extremes.
Yes. Oh, I do. I am
Yeah.
the most sensitive person that's probably ever walked this earth.
Yeah, it seems like things hit you hard and then you
Yeah.
are hit hard and then you recover quick. And then it's kind of like a very quick like
Yeah.
snowball effect, which is not bad. That's just your process.
Yeah.
And and that's been really interesting to watch. And I feel like my process is a little bit more um I don't like to share it. I hide it quite a bit, but I also search for things that I can control in my external reality in order to make it go away. And this year I really leaned into trust because for the first time, I think, or for the first time that I could really trust in it, I just felt I felt like my path was although it was still it's been very foggy and I've had a lot of confusion, like, what is this? Like, what am I doing? Like, what is this life? I have
Yeah.
kind of surrendered to that being my experience.
Yeah.
And so I've been more able and allowing to trust in it and just trusting and knowing that it's guiding me somewhere and not needing to know where or understand it or get there faster, which is typically my go-to. So I've been a little bit more at ease inside of my discomfort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More at ease inside of discomfort. I definitely feel that from you. And I think my experience has been similar, even if discomfort has felt intense a lot of times over this last year, there has been an overarching, like, a sense of feeling held through it. I think
Yeah.
more this year. And I think that's been a snowball over the last few years where it's like each year, moments of uncertainty, of fear, of insecurity, of deep sadness feel more cushioned. And I would almost attribute it to like this experience of just feeling like being more connected to like coming from the spiritual world, like my higher self and feeling more supported in that way and being more connected to, I guess, the spiritual realm of things, but in an integrated way. Because I mean, in 2018 or 2019 is when I first discovered like what a spiritual awakening was and manifestation, that there was more to the human experience than what met my eye, et cetera, et cetera. And there was maybe a inherent sense of comfort that came from that awakening in a way where it's just like, oh, there's more to it than what I can see. And what that comes with is like maybe a little bit more feeling supported a bit, but that never really felt all that grounded. Like if something happened that disrupted my expectations or made me feel insecure or uncertain about something, it would still hit me really, really hard. And there was no like way of integrating this idea that I was going to be okay or that I was going to be taken care of. Like even if I had mental ability to be like, well, I can just manifest and things will be okay. And I'm always going to be taken care of. And I have a higher self and blah, blah, blah. And maybe this is all happening for a reason. Like I could tell myself those things years ago, but it didn't feel true. Or it didn't feel like it actually helped me feel more safe or supported or secure like it does now. And now I feel like in the moments of the most chaos over the last year, when I was completely lost inside of my fear, my hurt, my doubt, my uncertainty. The best way I know how to say it, I think, is just that it was cushioned. Like there was a cushion of safety, of knowing, of truth, of divinity around those experiences that wasn't just being experienced by me telling myself that that was there or that I was going to be okay or that this was happening for a reason or blah, blah, blah. It was like, I live that now. And I know that to be true. And even in when I'm not consciously aware of it, telling myself it, it's still what I know to be true.
I've become over this last year, but even more so over the last 6 months, I would say, very aware of like most of what I'm feeling is not even from this lifetime. Like I'm
Yeah.
feeling so much that's accumulated that I'm just like here to release. And this whole human experience and all of the shit that I feel inside of it is just a effing illusion to what I'm really here to
Yes.
do, which is just experience life and release all of the illusion of who I am and just feel like the excitement of life itself and like the job and the like the nuances of like humanness are
Yeah.
really not even not important, but like not the point that
Yes.
and I've been able to hold that perspective much more firmly and not get so
Mhm.
bogged down and obsessive about it. And
Yes.
the more I tune into what I'm really feeling, it's like, well, where did this come from? And then I realize that like not me. Like where did this fear
Uh-huh.
of this thing come from? Like I've never been given a reason to fear this. Like whose fear is this? And like looking at it that way and starting to feel into it a little bit more, where before it was just like fear, warning bells, do something about it.
Yeah.
Now it's like, okay, let me feel this. Like, where is this from? What is this telling me? How do I let go of this? And then I feel it release, and I'm like, oh, like everything is just energy that's been like accumulated on top of me that I'm
Yeah.
just here to like get it all out, let it
Yeah.
all go, and see
It's
what's
all
under,
just trying to be seen, right? All this energy that you're
right?
feeling just wants to be seen, that we're
Yeah.
feeling.
So that was kind of a convoluted way of just saying that my perspective of my experience has really, really changed in
Yeah.
a much more tangible way where now I'm like seeing it and feeling it much more, whereas before it was knowing it intellectually and still not fully trusting it and buying into it and
Yes.
doing the conditioned thing anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I 100% feel that. I feel like I've been through a very similar shift this last year too. And when you were saying like you've had this experience of the nuances of the human experience, like the job and the money and the blah, 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 not feeling as significant or important anymore. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I've had that experience too, which sounds counterintuitive to my original point, which was that I feel like this year has been me being more fully into my human experience. But the difference is that I feel like I'm coming back into the human experience after several years of like riding high on the spiritual stuff and learning about healing and manifestation and energy and higher selves and spirit guides and blah, 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 blah. But I'm coming back into the human experience, taking with me what felt valuable to experience this, my humanness, so much lighter and with so much less suffering,
Yeah.
I think. Because similarly, like my relationship to what I do for work probably feels the least important than it ever has been in the best possible way at this point. Like you and I have talked about, I'm sure, in many episodes, our shared experience of attributing way too much of our self-worth and our sense of safety to our work. And I think both of us have made significant leaps this year in just our ability to feel okay with who we are, regardless of what we do or how much work we're doing or what we're doing for work, how many clients we have, or how much money we're making. I think we both have reached a place where, like, honestly, not just from the experience of
Right.
wanting it to be true in our heads, but like really just being like, I feel okay with who I am and my how I feel about myself isn't influenced so heavily by what's happening in my business.
And it's something that yes, I'm with you, and it's something that I've noticed is still fragile for me, where
Yeah.
I have to be very careful when I'm on social media specifically, or when I'm out interacting with people that are just not in this space mentally at all, where they're so attached to those things and it's so ingrained that I kind of have to guard myself a little bit from not getting pulled back into that
Yeah.
energy, because I'm still learning how to feel safe inside of it and like keep keep it there. Um,
Yes.
and so that's something that I've witnessed as well, is like when I'm in my own energy and I'm just kind of, and by that I mean when I'm like alone in my own schedule and my own routine, keeping to myself, it's very easy to maintain that frame of reference. And then as soon as
Mm,
I'm out and about and amongst other people who are talking about their work and talking about their finances, and it's like, where
yeah.
am I? I need to do more. And
Yeah.
I have,
Yeah.
I'm witnessing that push and pull on that tug on my energy, and needing to kind of remind myself, put up that barrier and that boundary of that's not me, that doesn't have to be me, and there's no shame in choosing this experience.
Yes. Yeah. I feel that so much. It also feels quite fragile for me too. I think I've reached a point very recently, and I was just thinking about this like literally yesterday, where something feels like it's solidified a little bit more for me. And I'm just going to like process it out loud because I think it's kind of an interesting experience over this last year where, like, this time last year, I was entirely self-employed, full-time coaching, working for myself. That was everything I had ever known. I was terrified of things being any differently than they were. I felt like how I felt about myself and how I felt about my life was dependent on how much money I was making, how many clients I had. And I was fighting through that a lot for many years up until last year, trying to separate myself from how intense that was, but it was still very much present for me. And then soon after we started this podcast, I moved to a new city. As part of my visa here in Australia, I had to get a second job. Everyone that I made friends with in this new city that I moved to didn't really know me as the person that I had presented myself as in every other relationship with every other person I've ever known. I didn't introduce myself to them as I'm Kelly and I'm a life coach and I do this and this is my story and this is my journey and this is what I do for work, and like trying to paint myself as significant or worthy to them based on what I did for work. Everyone that I met pretty much met me and knew me as this girl that just moved to Australia randomly and now she's working in a bingo for her visa. And that was kind of like the base in which my relationships in this new city were built, which I think I've referenced in other podcast episodes, how healing that was for me to have relationships with people be built where I still felt valuable or significant to these people, where they still wanted to connect with me, where I still talked to these people, I still made plans with these people, where they still wanted to see me and they were happy to see me and I was happy to see them. And it had nothing to do with what I did for work. Whereas I felt like up until that point, everyone knew me as Kelly the personal trainer, Kelly the coach, Kelly the person that is traveling and working remotely for herself and owns her own business and does all this stuff and is her story of her career. That was what I clung on to as my identity and what made me valuable or worthy or interesting enough to earn people's attention or friendship or connection or love. And where that has kind of come first full circle recently is that as I have been on this next leg of my travel journeys in Australia, and I've left that city, and I'm now traveling and I'm meeting new people, and I'm not working a second job anymore, and I'm kind of just working with some clients online, writing my second book, like not really doing a whole lot, really. And inevitably, when I do meet someone and they ask me what I do for work, I just am completely honest and tell them exactly like it doesn't feel like it's I'm trying to present to them a picture of who I am based on what I do for work. It's really just like, no, like I do some online coaching and I also like write for fun and I'm not really working that much right now. I'm kind of just like chilling and I'm also pet sitting randomly and also I just like finished working in hospitality when I was working in this city and I might do that again because it was kind of fun. And it's been interesting to see people's feedback to that because I will say that when I'm telling people that, it's so crazy to me how little attachment I feel to how they perceive it. And the feedback that I have got from it, like I literally just had this conversation with a guy in a coffee shop yesterday who was working at the coffee shop and saw me typing. And he's like, "Oh, are you working? What do you do for work? Blah, blah, blah." And I told him all of that. And he was like, "Oh my God, that's so cool." And he was like amazed by me. He's like, "What's your book? I'm gonna buy it." It just made me feel like was amazed by who I was as a person and what I had accomplished. And I was like, "Really?"
I mean, I did notice that you said, "Oh, I'm not doing that much, just writing my second book." You said that
I
2 minutes
did.
ago. You're like, "I'm not doing that much, just writing my second book." Like, what is she talking about? She's not doing that much. She's writing another book. So I just wanted to highlight that for you. Like,
Aw.
I actually thought about that a few nights ago. I was lying in bed and I was like, Kelly wrote a whole ass book. Like, that's crazy.
Aw. Thank you for
Yeah.
highlighting that for me because I really don't see it that way.
I mean, it's insane to me and it's
Aw.
not a small book.
It's
It's
a
a
very big book.
huge book. What an accomplishment. So I just wanted to highlight that because I
Aw.
did notice that you said that.
Thank
Um,
you.
Another interesting kind of parallel is that we've both uprooted this year.
True.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in completely
we
different
have.
locations. And hearing you talk about this detachment from what you do and not really caring how you present that. For someone listening to this that's not an entrepreneur, when you enter entrepreneurship, you look for mentorship and you look for, people to kind of help you get started because there's no blueprint. You just figure it out as you go. And the thing that was constantly kind of beating me over the head was tell everyone what you do, share what you do all the time, make sure everyone knows you have to be vocal about what you do, like shout it from the rooftops.
Yeah,
And there was this pressure to do that. And do
yeah,
that one when you're not well established, when you have no idea what you're doing, when you're feeling completely out of your depth and insecure about it. And now you're having to talk about it all the time.
yeah,
And that was always a very big pain point for me, even when I was doing personal training, even when I
yeah,
was, because there was always a reason why it didn't feel like I was good enough yet. Because oh, where was your gym? It's in my basement. And I'd have to stand there and watch them like process. And then I would figure out a way to make sure that they knew that just because it was in my basement didn't mean that it wasn't a legit facility. No, I've got a
I still feel
state-of-the-art
that.
facility down there. It's like tons
Oh
of
yeah.
equipment. It looks like a commercial facility. And it's true, it did. But I had to make sure that they knew that. Like there was
Yeah.
all of these layers of discomfort inside of those conversations. And then I entered inside of the spiritual space, and it's like, how the hell do I tell someone what I do now? I channel disembodied beings. Like, I, especially living in a place like Michigan, like I
Yeah.
couldn't say that. I mean, I could, but then that would open up a lot of existential conversations that I didn't necessarily want to have in the dentist chair.
Sure.
And so I would just lie and say, oh, I'm a coach. And then they'd say, what kind of coach? And then I would just either say personal trainer or work in mental health. And
Yeah.
I've noticed that I still do that. I still kind of brush it aside where someone's like, oh, what do you do now? And I'll say, oh, I run an online community. And they'll say,
Mm.
what kind? And I'll say, I work in mental health. And I
Yeah.
don't really say what I do. But I did go to this entrepreneur gathering recently, and I stated exactly what it was. And everyone was like, oh, you came to the right place, or like, do you host cacao ceremonies? And it was,
Ah,
like everyone was kind of like familiar with it, which was
yeah, that's
very
cool.
interesting because that has not been my experience, and being in a new location has offered me like a new energy. And so I'm still witnessing my discomfort inside of like, well, is this person going to be receptive to that or not? So
Yeah.
that is still something that I am struggling with.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Hearing you say it, I realize that is something that I still struggle with too, and I'm doing the same thing. Like I found my way of like bypassing the conversation by rather than saying, I'm a coach, and then they go, what kind of coach? And then I have to try to explain it. I just go, oh, I do like mental health counseling. That's been my most
Yeah,
recent
yeah,
go-to, which has made that conversation feel a lot easier for me.
right.
And I don't necessarily feel like it's a full cop out because it is relevant to mental health, what I do, and people
Yeah.
can understand that. And I don't necessarily always want to be having the very long conversation about what it is with the guy that works at the coffee
Yes,
shop.
exactly. And I think I used to shame myself a lot for holding back and
Yeah.
not telling the world everything that I do. And
Yes.
now sometimes I just don't feel like it's necessary. Like if this
Yeah.
person doesn't know the extent of what I do and never joins my community and never becomes my client, I'm okay with that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I feel that too. And I feel like that is representative of the growth and the shift that we've been through, where there isn't so much of a like I feel like the entrepreneurial path painted this picture of scarcity through the
Yeah.
everyone needs to know and every person that you meet is an opportunity to get a new client and blah blah
Yes.
blah blah blah. And now it's just like, okay, they might be, but I'm not gonna treat them like that because that doesn't feel authentic to me, first of all, to like think of everyone as a business opportunity. Um, but also just like I want to I want to just feel like a normal human being that can go about her day and not be thinking about like, when's my next client gonna come? Is it the person at the coffee shop? And is this conversation that I wasn't expecting to have in the grocery store now supposed to be this high pressure sales conversation that I'm being pressured to do right here, right now, just because some mentor told me that every person that I meet that asks me what I do for work is a potential client and I'm supposed to try to sell them on the spot.
The thing that I think is the biggest like idea or concept that I've learned this year that I'm still exploring. So this is a, what I'm about to explain is coming from a version of me that is still exploring it and doesn't understand it fully yet, is the true power of frequency. And our
Yeah.
entire society is built on a complete misunderstanding of how energy works, and it's completely backwards.
Hmm.
And and if you understand frequency, you understand that you have to feel something in order to access it. And the way we go about things is we try to access it through action. And after you have the right outcome from the action you do, then that will facilitate the feeling that you're searching for. And then you'll be able to access the frequency inside of that sensation, that emotion. It literally does not and cannot be that way. You have to let it in and allow it to be there. And then once you're feeling it, the desired feeling you're searching for, just let it in and feel it now, then you're inside of that energy. And then you can channel that energy into the action that you take. Well, that will then facilitate an outcome and a result that will be different because you're already in a different frequency.
Yeah.
When my guides were like explaining this with a little bit more detail, I was like, holy shit, I'm still operating from this conditioned belief system of not trusting this concept.
Yes.
Because it's hard to
Yes.
trust in something that you've been taught is the complete opposite way. And the
Hmm.
entire kind of paradigm of business doesn't work that way. It works in the opposite way.
Yes. Yes. Well, I want to come back to something that you told me very recently, or that you reflected back to me very recently in one of our personal conversations that has stuck with me very much. It's something that I kind of knew before, but you kind of like brought it full circle for me. And it was when I was telling you that I randomly got referred like a couple of clients out of the blue, like completely out of nowhere. I haven't been trying. Like for anyone that follows me on social media, I haven't posted in months. Like I'm just out of trying to grow my business in any intentional way. And then I got referred these two clients randomly out of the blue and a potential third one as well. And your immediate response was that like, because I said something along the lines of, and I didn't even do anything to get these clients. And you said something like, but you did. Like
Yeah.
it's your frequency, it's
Yeah.
your energy that
Yeah.
created these clients. And I was like, I definitely feel like you're right.
Yeah.
But it's hard
I
to,
know. It's hard.
yeah,
It's hard to justify that doing nothing created a different outcome because
yeah,
we're taught to go through life that we have to work for the outcome that we want. We can't just sit around and do nothing. And I've argued this with my guides so many times that it doesn't matter how much I talk about my business, nothing changes. And they say over and over and over again, the power, like there is an energy and there's a frequency in words. When you're vocal, when you speak words, when you write words, there's an energy there, but it pales in comparison to the frequency that's emitted through you from your being.
yeah,
And they've said over and over again, as you grow and evolve, so will your business because your frequency will change and it will facilitate a difference in outcome. And I've said, yes, but how can you explain that tangibly to me? Like, will I do
yeah,
something different? Will I say something different? And they keep saying, no, your frequency will change. And that's been challenging for me to understand. Like, just because I'm
yeah,
feeling happier and more free, that means that like things will just naturally come. And I think
right,
that, yes, and
right,
like you have been taking a step back from the traditional sense of social media,
yeah,
but you've been sharing a lot of your life on social
that is
media
true. That is true. And I feel like that has been a just more than anything is a representation of like me being excited about how I'm living my life
mm,
recently, which is me just living it, which is me just like being excited about the fact that I'm going to dance classes and then I'm traveling and then I'm meeting these new people and then I'm just kind of treating social media just like it's an
was
expression of me as a
originally meant
person.
to be.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, which is feeling so fun
Yeah.
recently, so much fun. And I mean, even though the two clients that were referred to me don't even follow me on social media, it does feel like that representation of who I'm stepping into and who I'm becoming and how I'm showing myself um, to the world and how I'm presenting myself to the world feels like an increase in frequency that could potentially explain how things are happening differently for me.
They want to feel how you're currently feeling.
Yeah,
And that's how you found each other.
right.
They've been putting out into the world, I want to feel this thing, and you're feeling it.
Yeah.
And so you were brought together because you want to share that and they want to receive
Hmm.
it.
Right.
And that
even though they
can't
never
be,
saw me share it.
but they felt it and the
Yeah,
intention was there.
the intention. Yeah,
Excuse me. And the universe did the rest.
yeah. That does feel accurate
You can't
too.
fake that. It
Yeah.
can't be faked.
Oh,
Sorry. I'm
hairball.
I'm fighting for my life right now.
Oh,
Um, I'm in a place and I'm allergic to something here, so I'm like struggling through it. Um, but what I was going to say was one of the things that's come to my attention a lot in the last year is just how the grass always looks greener and it
yeah.
never is. Ever.
So, so
Ever,
true.
ever, ever. And I've had conversations with my guides before where I have been envious of people. And, the conversation goes something like, yeah, but they don't feel that way about what they're doing. They feel
Right.
very unworthy inside of what they're doing. They think what they're doing is very subpar. They're very unhappy. And getting that information was very eye-opening because
Yeah.
I never would have known that.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that understanding has integrated more for me over this last year too. The grass is not always greener. The comparison of where I think other people are based on the little bit snippet that I'm seeing into their life and imagining like if I was there, I would be so much happier or they're so much happier than me. Like there's always been, again, the mental understanding of that not
Mental
being true.
understanding. Yeah.
Yeah, but it does feel more like a, yeah, I get it now. I totally get it. And I think I've experienced it even in like comparing me to me, where it's like I think actually a lot of this year has been not comparing me to other people as much as I've been comparing me to past me and me to projected future me. There's been a lot of times where I've been like, oh, I can't wait until I'm traveling here, or I can't wait
Yeah.
until this day off, or I can't wait until this experience, or I can't wait until I meet this person, or I can't, blah, blah, blah. Or thinking back into the past where it's like, oh, I was happier then, or and creating all of these illusions of the past or the future being better or worse than where I am now. And I think I've started seeing through it so much more clearly and being able to recognize that there is a quote, but okay, I'm going to bring Kyle Cease into it because I always do. And this is the
Well, it's our
perfect
last
opportunity.
episode. It's our
It is
last
our
chance
last
that you're going to get to
episode,
sing his praises.
I'm gonna just shout my love for Kyle Cease from the rooftops one more time. But I remember him saying, and I might have referenced this in another episode, but I remember him saying before that like nothing is better than now. Even the
Yeah.
most exciting, thrilling, abundant, beautiful, love-filled future is nothing in comparison to what is so good about now. And again, I heard that and I was like, I get what you're saying. I can mentally understand what you mean by that, but I totally get it now. Maybe not to the extent he does necessarily, but I feel like I've lived it where I've had so many moments of like getting excited about something in the future and how my circumstances are going to be this and that and whatever, and then being in it and experiencing it but my mind is somewhere else, or I'm
Can
not
I
fully present with it.
can I ground this in because it's
Yes,
exactly what
please.
I was talking to about frequency.
Yes.
I've spent my whole life living for the future. I'll be
Yeah,
happier when, things will be better when. And when you're always doing that, the future will come and you'll still be doing that
that's right.
because you can't experience a frequency in a future scenario. You can only experience it now. That's what I'm
Yeah,
trying to say is a frequency can't be accessed through action, through a change in location, through a timeline change. It's only accessed when you let it in. And so
yeah,
if you're looking to feel peace, for example, you're not going to feel it in the future if you can't feel it now. There is
that's right.
only now.
That's right.
That's what he's saying. And so when you can live for the present and feel everything that you want to feel now, then you're giving yourself the gift of your future self now. And there is only now.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that has been the biggest kind of perspective shift that I've had this year is
Yeah,
I notice I'm still searching for something. I'm still chasing something, even though I know better, even though I'm telling myself I'm not, I'm still doing it. Like, what if I can just allow myself to live in this now present moment and think about this moment is like the best moment that I will ever have. Like it's not going to ever
yes,
get better than it is now.
yeah,
Can I allow that to be my experience? And the
yeah,
more I've done that, the more I have felt better
yeah,
and been happier.
yeah. I love that. And I think this is a great jumping off point coming out of our conversation of the things that we've learned over the last year and the perspective shifts and what has led us to being different now than we were a year ago to now what feels relevant of what we project we're going to change or what's going to change for us from this point forward or what feels relevant to work towards or to move through or to and I mean I don't necessarily mean it in like what do we want to what are our goals for the next year necessarily and I also know that we're not going to be able to accurately predict at all what's going to come up over this next year but do you have a sense for what what's coming in this next year?
I don't have a sense of what's coming because there's no point in projecting that. I'm always
Yeah,
wrong. And I'm always both disappointed and surprised in a good way at the same time.
totally.
Um, but what I'm aiming for and what I'm hoping for
Yeah,
is to be so excited about life,
yeah,
about the life I'm living now. Like I've been doing this until recently. Like every new Airbnb I'm at, I'm like, yeah, but I can't wait to get to the next one. Yeah, but I can't wait to get to the
right.
next one. I just want to get
Yeah,
to the long-term one. And then once I'm in the long-term one, I'll be satisfied. And now I'm in the long-term one. I'm like, now I just want my house. I just want to be able to buy the house and live in the house. I'm
yeah.
still fucking doing it. And so can I just allow where I'm at to be like enough and okay and exciting? And that is really what I am kind of moving into this next year as my focus.
I relate to that so strongly. I've been doing the exact same thing where it was like I was in Ken's and I can't wait until I move out of my house share and I'm house sitting and then I was and then oh but I can't wait until I'm in the Whit Sundays and I was but I can't wait until I'm in the Gold Coast
Yeah.
then I was and now it's like oh and now I can't wait until I have a place where I can settle and like unpack my bags even though like 2 months ago I was like I can't wait till I'm backpacking again and traveling and living
It's
out of
exhausting.
yeah, it's so funny how our mind will always justify how where we're at right now is not enough. And I also intend, similarly to you, to let myself be really excited about right now, always, as much as humanly possible, and to discipline my mind to come back to what's so exciting about right now when I notice it starting to spin the story about how now is not as good as the future is going to be.
What are we protecting ourselves from when we do that?
To me, it feels like it's just the lack of safety of being present. Like this underlying idea that if I'm not constantly thinking about what's next, something bad is going to happen, the shoe is going to drop, I'm not going to get anywhere. I'm going to be a lazy person. All these different versions saying the same thing of like, if I'm in the now, if I'm just purely present and happy and content with now, bad things will happen, whatever that bad thing looks like.
Or the shitty thing that I'm experiencing now is always going to be the shitty thing I'm experiencing because I'll never get
That
better.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, that's one that requires unpacking and sitting with and working on. It's not something that it's like a, you know, disciplining your mind to be different. Like it really requires safety. That has been a big one
Yeah,
for me lately, feeling safe inside of my physical body right here, right now, without needing
yeah.
it or me to change.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. Any final takeaways that you want to leave people with for today?
Final takeaways. Can I just say this has been a very fun
Yeah.
year that I know you and I talk about it every time before we start the podcast where we're like, I'm just so happy to connect with you every week and excited to
Hmm.
talk to you every week. And it has been so valuable to me in ways that I've shared, in ways that I don't even understand. Like, I just know that this last year, meeting with you, connecting with you, having these conversations, being able to have the space to just vulnerably share my experience of what I'm moving through. I mean, this last year, I'm sure I've shared every week what chaotic thing was happening from the cyclone to I don't even know, like deciding
All
I'm
the
going to go to
things. Yeah.
university and then having the whole ego death around social media and like everything that has happened over this last year. It's been just immensely cathartic to have this space to just show up and talk about it without necessarily needing to talk about it meaningfully or to add meaning to what was happening, but that kind of also just organically happened. And I found that to be immensely helpful.
Something I would like to say that just came to me is that a lot of us, especially in the spiritual space, we take it upon ourselves to be like the healer. Like it's our purpose as a star seed, as a light worker, that we have to create change of some sort, where I'm
Yeah,
noticing more and more that is not what we come here to do, really. We come here to feel the extent of who we are, and that frequency then radiates from us and affects other people. And it's nothing that we do to them or for them, it's all for ourselves. And
totally.
it's really challenging to accept that when you don't see the outcome or the benefit of all the work you're doing, right? Not receiving the validation that what you're doing is making a difference. And we've
Yeah.
been getting on this podcast every week for a year. And I'm sure there are people listening and watching that have been deeply affected by it or just subtly affected by it that will never know because they
That's
haven't
true.
reached out to us to let us know. And that doesn't mean that we haven't made a difference through this. And that also doesn't mean that we aren't feeling the difference that we're making because we're aware that people are watching this and listening to it. We don't know who you are, but we're so grateful.
Yeah. And I'm so grateful as well that this space has allowed us an opportunity to both present ourselves as people in the space that do support, that do facilitate, that, do this kind of work and also are human. And I feel like we've been very forward with our struggles and what we're moving through and the stories that we're telling ourselves and our struggles and all of that without necessarily having to paint it as something that we've already overcome, to
Right.
present ourselves as someone who is an authority figure
Expert, yeah.
or an expert in the field. Yet I still feel like every conversation that we've had, I have just been so proud of us and how we navigated it and what we're able to offer just by speaking our truth and speaking about what we're moving through and the insights that we're having in real time without having to have processed them and wrapped them in a perfect little bow.
You're never going to be an expert. I don't care how educated you are, who you are, you're never going to be an expert. There's always going to be something new to understand and learn and explore and discover, and that's the entire point. And so, for anyone listening or watching, I encourage you to go out and do that and not be afraid of
Yeah.
getting it wrong or failing or looking silly because nobody knows what they're doing,
Yeah,
including us. We're figuring it out as we
totally.
go, and that's so okay.
Yes, it is so okay. And if you let it be okay, it's so fun.
Right. It's freeing.
It is very
Yeah.
freeing.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you, Madness and Meaning crew. We love you all so much. Reach out to us anytime if you ever want to chat. We're here.
absolutely.
Have a great rest of your year
Yeah,
and all the best.
all the best. Mwah.